Hi there, Sugar Snaps. Welcome into the studio. Today I want to share a dyeing tutorial with you. I'm going to be using RIT dyes. So in this video, we'll go over how to remove color if you've done a dye job and you want to fade the color if it's too dark, or you want to remove the color almost entirely. For that, we'll be using RIT Color Remover. I'll also show you how to dye synthetic fibers using RIT synthetic dye and nylon fabrics with the RIT regular dye. For today's project, I am dyeing this cardigan. This is a nylon and polyester cardigan that I want to dye navy blue with the synthetic dye. I'll also be dyeing this lacy tank top. This is mostly nylon. I'll be dyeing this with the synthetic dye as well. I'll be using color remover on this little summer dress to lighten this green color. And I'll be using the RIT dye in wine to over dye this lacy cardigan. I'll go over the tools and materials as we do each of these different techniques, so check for the materials throughout the video as well as in the description below. As you can see, RIT dye comes in a variety of fun colors, and these are only some of the dyes that they carry. They also have a line of their synthetic dyes. I only have the navy blue and the orange currently, but you can find multiple in the synthetic dyes. And they also have a great color mixing page on their website. You can use their recipe guide to mix the different colors to create different hues. To remove color from a garment, I'll be using this summer dress that I previously dyed, and you can check out that video here. You're going to need a pot and a stir spoon, a pair of rubber gloves, a face mask, preferably an N95, and then water to fill your pot and whatever garment it is that you're removing color from. Typically, you can remove color from a garment that you previously dyed and the dye job didn't go the way you planned. You can also use color remover to remove any dye stains that were an accident during a dyeing project. I highly suggest keeping your pots and stir spoons and anything that you're using for dyeing as solely for dyeing. So I have labeled my pot with dyeing, and I use this only for chemical dyeing or natural dyeing. I don't use it in my kitchen, as well as my stir spoon. So anything that I dye with, I keep separate in the studio or away from the kitchen so it doesn't accidentally get used. It's just better for your health. You don't want to be consuming the dye powders or the chemicals that you use in your dyeing, whether it is chemical dye or natural dye. Could still be some health hazards. Also, wearing rubber gloves when you're working with the color remover, because it may be caustic to your skin and you don't want to breathe in the powder. So having some sort of mask to cover your nose and your mouth so you're not breathing in any of the powders. In order to have the color remover powder work without reacting with the metal of your pot, you're going to want a stainless steel pot. And these could be found at most kitchen supply stores or at a thrift store. Just make sure to check the bottom. Usually it says somewhere on the packaging or on the pot itself whether it's stainless steel or not. Some other types of pots may cause reaction with the color remover. If you're using a copper pot or a pot that is rusted, that can have a reaction with the color remover and it won't work the way you want it to. Okay, let's get started with this color removing. First up, fill your pot with water so that there's enough water that you would be able to cover whatever garment or piece of fabric you're putting in the pot, and then put it on the stove and allow it to come to almost a simmer. You want it to be about 200 degrees Fahrenheit. You can guesstimate. If there are bubbles on the bottom, but they're not rising to the surface, causing the water to boil, that's a good stage. Add the package of color remover, add the whole thing in while wearing a dust mask and gloves, and mix it well into your pot of water. And then carefully submerge the unfolded fabric into the water bath. You don't want the fabric bunched up on itself or starting to fold up on itself, because the color remover won't be able to access those areas as well. You'll end up with removing some of the color, but not in an even way. Stir the mixture with your garment in the pot for at least 20 minutes. At that point, you can drain the liquid off into your sink. If this bothers you, you can find a different way of disposing the liquid. The written instructions do say to pour it down the drain. At this point, put on your rubber gloves if you haven't already, and start to rinse the fabric out in warm water, slowly moving to cool water as you're able to remove all of the color remover and any dye that is coming out of the garment. Once you've rinsed your fabric or garment thoroughly and the water has run clear, you'll want to wash your material with detergent either by hand or putting it through a wash and dryer cycle. Next up, we'll work on dyeing with the synthetic grit dye. I have these two tops that I will be dyeing. I found my N95 mask, so I'll be using this. So for this process, you want, again, a stainless steel pot, some sort of stir spoon, and these should be set aside for dyeing only. Pair of rubber gloves, your mask to wear when you're working over the steaming pot so that you're not breathing in the fumes. Your synthetic dye, and the amount you'll need will depend on how much you're dyeing. The bottle suggests you have half a bottle per pound of fabric, and if you're using polyester or dyeing polyester, you want the full bottle to dye a garment that is polyester. And then whatever it is you're going to be dyeing. Let's get started. First, you want to prepare your fabric or your garment, so you need to pre-wash these. Once they're pre-washed, you don't need to dry them again. Having them wet will be helpful for the dyeing process. Then you're going to fill your pot with water, put it on the stove, and bring it to just below a boil. So there's bubbles at the bottom. Maybe it's simmering a little bit, but it's not a full boil. Then you're going to shake your bottle of dye really well. Make sure that it's closed. Put on your rubber gloves and add the dye to the pot of very hot water. Mix it in well so it's well distributed, and then you can add the fabric to the dye bath. And using your stir spoon, stir constantly. If you don't stir constantly, the outcome will be a mottled look and the fabric folding in on itself. Those areas will not dye as dark as other areas, and so you end up with a mottled look. If you want something that's nice and evenly dyed, you do want to stand there and mix the entire time. Stir for 30 minutes or up to 60 minutes if you want a deep color. Polyester takes a little bit longer to dye than, say, nylon. And the fabric will look darker when it is wet than it will when it dries. Wearing your gloves, you'll lift your garments out of the dye bath, squeeze out any excess dye, and then wash in cool water until the water runs clear, and wash in warm water with a mild detergent. You could do this in your washing machine or by hand. Allow it to air dry or put it through a dry cycle in your dryer, and then your garment is ready to go. Our last piece for the day is this nylon and spandex lace cardigan. So I'm using the Wine Rit. This is their regular line of dye, and it can be used on cotton, linen, rayon, silk, wool, and nylon. For this project, you'll need a stainless steel pot, stir spoon, your rubber gloves, a dust mask. This is an N95. If you're dyeing nylon, wool, or silk, then you'll want white vinegar. I'll be using white vinegar today on this nylon cardigan. If you're dyeing cotton, linen, or rayon, you're going to want to add salt. So plain white table salt that's non-iodized will be your additive. Let's get started. Okay, first you're going to want to pre-wash your fabric once again to remove any finishes or stains. For every pound of fabric material, you're going to want half a bottle of the Rit dye, as well as 3 gallons of very, very hot water. You want enough water so that the garment can move around freely, so that the dye can access all the folds and surface of the fabric. First off, you want to shake your bottle of dye really well. Setting that aside, put on your rubber gloves and add hot water to a plastic bucket or a stainless steel pot. You want a water temperature that's about 140 degrees Fahrenheit. So if you have a thermometer, you can check that. I don't, so I was guesstimating by feel. Add 1 teaspoon of liquid dish detergent. Add 1 cup of either salt or vinegar. Salt if you're doing cotton, rayon, or linen. Add 1 cup of vinegar for nylon, silk, or wool. And then you're going to add the dye. Again, a half a bottle of dye if you're using a pound of fabric. Mix this well in the pot of hot water so that everything's combined thoroughly. Using your pre-washed material that's still damp, gently lower this into the dye bath, making sure everything is unfolded. There's no pieces of the material that are overlapping each other so that everything has access to the dye. Just stir constantly for 30 minutes, up to 60 minutes if you want a really dark color. And I do suggest that you stand there for the full 30 minutes and stir, or else you'll end up with a mottled dye result, which is cool if that's what you're going for. But if you want a solid color, then you'll want to stand there and make sure that all the folds are worked out of the fabric so that the dye ends up a nice flat color. The fabric will look darker when it's wet, so keep that in mind when you decide when to pull it out. Wash with cool water until the water runs clear. Put it through either a wash cycle in your washer and dryer, or wash it by hand with some mild detergent. At this point, you could either dry it and use your garment, or put it through a RIT Color Stay dye fixative process so that it maximizes the color retention. This will help the garment from fading after each wash. Here are all the finished pieces. I'll show you each one individually. The blue cardigan, the blue lace tank top, the wine-colored cardigan, all of these pieces, the dye turned out really even. These have been put through a wash cycle and a dry cycle in the washing machine, and the dye has maintained a vibrant color. All these pieces are now refreshed, they're vibrant in color, they look brand new, and they're ready to go to their new home. I hope you found this tutorial helpful. If you did, hit subscribe to see more of my videos. Some are tutorials, some are projects that I share here on my channel. Also check out Textile Indie, where I share more on basket weaving, natural dyeing, and other fiber arts. I'd love to have you join my email list, where I send out resources for all kinds of fiber arts, as well as other updates from the channel and my website. And don't forget to check the description, which is over here somewhere, for all of the tools and materials that I used in this video. If you're a Textile Indie regular, thanks for being here yet again. If you're new to my channel, thanks for sticking around, and I hope you subscribe, and I will see you in my next video. Happy making!